In just 42 seconds, one of Hollywood's biggest stars completely lost it on live television. What started as a conversation about charity work exploded into an all-out verbal war that left Bill Maher scrambling and George Clooney walking off set in front of millions of viewers. The cameras caught every brutal second as respect turned to rage and a friendly chat became the most shocking moment of the year. Before we dive into what happened, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. We bring you daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, the confrontations they don't want you to see, and the moments that reveal who these celebrities really are behind the cameras. Last night's episode of Real Time started like any other Friday evening. George Clooney walked onto the stage wearing his trademark charm and that famous smile everyone knows. The studio audience erupted in applause as he shook Bill Maher's hand and settled into the guest chair. The lighting was perfect. The crowd was excited. And nobody in that room had any idea they were about to witness television history. Bill opened with his usual confident smirk, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. George Clooney, everybody? The man who makes saving the world look easy, whether he's doing it in movies or in real life. Welcome back to the show. Clooney nodded graciously, clearly comfortable in the spotlight. Thanks for having me, Bill. Always good to be here. So let's talk about your latest project, Bill continued, shuffling some papers on his desk. You've been working with this humanitarian organization in Sudan, raising awareness about the situation there. Very noble stuff. Very Hollywood of you. That last line hung in the air for just a second too long. Clooney's smile tightened slightly at the corners, but he kept his composure. Well, I wouldn't call it Hollywood. I'd call it human. People are suffering. And if I can use my platform to help, why wouldn't I? Bill laughed, but there was an edge to it. Right, but come on, you have to admit there's something a little, I don't know, performative about it? All these celebrities flying to crisis zones, taking pictures, then flying back to their mansions in LA? The audience went quiet. You could feel the temperature in the room shift. Clooney sat up straighter in his chair, his jaw tightening. Performative? Bill, I've been working on Sudan for over 15 years. This isn't some Instagram stunt. We've raised over $100 million. We've built schools, hospitals, provided clean water to communities that had nothing. Sure. Bill waved his hand dismissively. I'm not saying you haven't done good things. I'm just saying there's a certain, ego that comes with it. Like you need everyone to know how good you are. Clooney's eyes narrowed. His voice stayed calm, but everyone watching could hear the warning in it. I do interviews like this because it raises awareness. That's how we get donations. That's how we save lives. If you think that's about ego, you're completely missing the point. Bill leaned forward, sensing he'd hit a nerve and clearly enjoying it. But see, that's the thing about you Hollywood types. You can't just do something good quietly. You have to make sure everyone knows about it. You have to be the hero of your own story. Hollywood types? Clooney repeated, his voice dropping lower. What the hell is that supposed to mean? The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the playful back and forth they usually saw on the show. This was something else entirely. Bill shrugged, playing it casual. I'm just saying, there's a certain pattern. Rich celebrities feel guilty about their wealth, so they do some charity work, make sure the cameras are there, and then they feel better about themselves. It's ego wrapped in altruism. Clooney's face was starting to flush. You know what, Bill? I've sat through a lot of your sarcasm over the years. I've laughed at your jokes, even when they were at my expense. But this is different. You're sitting here in your comfortable studio, making millions of dollars to crack jokes, and you're questioning whether my work is genuine? I'm just asking the questions people are thinking. Bill shot back, his voice rising slightly. That's what I do on this show. I ask the uncomfortable questions that everyone else is too polite to ask. No, Clooney said firmly. What you do is tear people down because it makes you feel smart. You hide behind this idea that you're some truth teller, but really you're just cynical. And cynicism is easy, Bill. Anyone can sit back and mock people who are actually trying to make a difference. The audience was dead silent now. Several people looked at each other nervously, unsure if they should clap or stay quiet. Bill's face was getting red, and his trademark smirk was starting to crack. That's rich coming from someone who's made hundreds of millions playing pretend for a living, Bill snapped back. Don't act like you're some saint because you write some checks and pose for photos with African kids." The moment those words left Bill's mouth, you could see something change in Clooney's eyes. The politeness was gone. The Hollywood charm evaporated completely. He pointed a finger at Bill, his hand shaking slightly with anger. "Don't you dare," Clooney said, his voice like steel. "Don't you dare diminish the work that real people are doing on the ground. People who risk their lives every single day to help others. Yeah, I write checks. Big ones. And you know what else I do? I show up. I meet with world leaders. I testify before Congress. I use every bit of influence I have to make real change happen. What the fuck do you do besides sit here and make fun of people who give a damn?" Bill's eyes widened. Guests didn't usually swear on his show, and they definitely didn't challenge him this directly. "Hey, I give to charity," he said defensively. "I donate plenty." "Oh, you donate?" Clooney let out a harsh laugh. "That's great, Bill. Do you want a medal? Do you want everyone to know how generous you are? Because that's what you're accusing me of, right? Wanting recognition? I'm accusing you of being a hypocrite," Bill said, his voice getting louder. "You fly around on private jets talking about saving the planet. You live in a $15 million mansion while lecturing people about inequality. You're the definition of limousine liberal." Clooney stood up from his chair so fast it almost tipped over backward. "You want to talk about hypocrisy? Let's talk about you. You sit here every week acting like you're some champion of progressive values, but the moment someone actually does something meaningful, you tear them down. You're not a progressive, Bill. You're just a contrarian who makes money off cynicism." Bill stood up too, facing Clooney across the desk. The studio crew was frozen, unsure if they should cut to commercial or keep rolling. "I ask tough questions. That's my job. If you can't handle being challenged, maybe you shouldn't come on shows like this." "Challenged?" Clooney's voice was getting louder now, echoing through the studio. "You didn't challenge me, Bill. You insulted me. You insulted the work of thousands of people who are actually making a difference. And you did it because you think being a cynic makes you look smart. Well, let me tell you something it doesn't. It makes you look like a bitter old man who can't stand to see other people doing good in the world." The audience gasped. Several people covered their mouths in shock. Nobody talked to Bill Maher like this on his own show. Bill's face was bright red now, veins visible on his forehead. "Get off my stage," he said through gritted teeth. "Oh, I'm leaving," Clooney shot back. "I don't need to stand here and listen to this bullshit. You know what your problem is, Bill? You've spent so many years making fun of everyone else that you've forgotten what it's like to actually believe in something. You're so afraid of looking naive or stupid that you've become this cynical shell of a person who can't even recognize genuine compassion when it's standing right in front of you." "I said get off my stage," Bill shouted, his voice cracking slightly. "You talk about ego," Clooney continued, ignoring him completely. He was on a roll now, months or maybe years of frustration pouring out all at once. "Your entire show is about your ego, Bill. Every episode is just you telling everyone how much smarter you are than them, how you're the only one who sees through the bullshit. But you know what? Sometimes people are just trying to do good things. Sometimes there's no hidden agenda. Sometimes a person sees suffering in the world and wants to help. And the fact that you can't understand that, the fact that you have to make it into something ugly and self-serving, says a hell of a lot more about you than it does about me." Bill was gripping the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles were white. "You're done here. Get out." "I'm not done talking," Clooney said, his voice shaking with emotion. "Because I want you to understand something. When you sit here and mock the work that people do, when you reduce it to ego and performance, you're not just attacking me. You're attacking every single person who donates their time and money to these causes. You're telling your viewers that caring about others is stupid, that trying to help is just some celebrity game. And that's dangerous, Bill. That's actually dangerous." "Security!" Bill called out, looking toward the edge of the stage. "Don't bother," Clooney said, holding up his hand. "I'm leaving. But before I go, I want everyone watching to know something." He turned toward the camera, addressing the audience at home directly. "Don't listen to people like Bill. Don't let cynicism win. If you see something wrong in the world and you want to help, do it. Don't worry about whether people will think you're doing it for the right reasons. Don't worry about whether some talk show host is going to make fun of you. Just do it. Because the world needs people who give a damn a hell of a lot more than it needs people who sit around making clever jokes about those who do. Bill slammed his hand on the desk. That's enough. Get him out of here. 2 security guards started walking toward the stage, but Clooney was already moving. He ripped off his microphone and threw it on the chair behind him. The wire dangled awkwardly as he walked toward the edge of the stage. You know what the saddest part is, Bill? Clooney said, stopping for one final moment. I actually used to respect you. I thought you were someone who asked tough questions to get to the truth. But tonight showed me what you really are. You're just a bully with a platform. And bullies always punch down because they're too scared to punch up. Fuck you, Clooney! Bill shouted, completely losing his composure now. The audience gasped again, some people even standing up to get a better view of the chaos. No, Bill, Clooney said quietly, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife. Fuck you. And with that, George Clooney walked off the stage. The camera followed him as he moved through the studio, past shocked crew members, past audience members who were standing now, some filming on their phones. His face was set in stone, jaw clenched, eyes focused straight ahead. He didn't look back, didn't hesitate, didn't stop. Bill stood at his desk, breathing heavily, his carefully constructed image completely shattered. He looked around at the studio, at the cameras still rolling, at the audience staring at him in stunned silence. For the first time in his career, Bill Maher looked like he didn't know what to say. Go to commercial, someone yelled from offstage, but the damage was already done. The cameras had caught everything. The mics had picked up every word. Millions of people had just watched one of Hollywood's most respected actors completely dismantle Bill Maher on his own show. And it was already spreading across the internet like wildfire. The studio doors slammed shut behind Clooney, the sound echoing through the silent space. Bill slowly sat back down in his chair, his hands shaking slightly as he reached for his water glass. The audience didn't know whether to clap or sit in silence. Some people were already leaving, heading for the exits. One of the producers ran onto the stage, whispering urgently in Bill's ear. He nodded numbly, looking like he'd just been hit by a truck. The screens around the studio went dark as they finally cut to commercial, but it was too late. The moment was already being clipped, shared, tweeted, and discussed across every social media platform. Backstage, crew members were scrambling. Some were trying to figure out what to do for the rest of the show. Others were already on their phones, texting friends and family about what they'd just witnessed. George Clooney's security team had surrounded him as he headed toward the exit, but everyone who saw him said the same thing: he didn't look upset anymore. He looked relieved, like he'd been holding that in for years and finally got to say what he really thought. Back in the studio, Bill sat at his desk during the commercial break, staring at nothing. His makeup team tried to touch him up, but he waved them away. His producers were having urgent conversations in the corner, trying to figure out how to salvage the rest of the show. But everyone knew the truth: nothing else that happened tonight would matter. This was the only thing anyone would remember. The audience members who remained were whispering to each other, phones out, recording their own reactions. Some looked excited by the drama they'd witnessed. Others looked uncomfortable, like they'd just watched something they weren't supposed to see. A few people were arguing with each other about who was right and who was wrong. When the show came back from commercial, Bill's usual confidence was nowhere to be found. He cleared his throat several times before speaking. Well, he said, his voice hoarse. That was unexpected. A few people in the audience laughed nervously, but most stayed silent. Let's bring out our next guest, Bill continued, clearly trying to move on as quickly as possible. But it was obvious to everyone watching that the show was over. Not just this episode, but something bigger. The carefully crafted image of Bill Maher as the cool, untouchable cynic who could say anything and get away with it had been completely destroyed in less than 15 minutes. George Clooney had walked onto that stage as a guest and walked off as a man who'd said exactly what he meant. Consequences be damned. The green room, where guests usually waited, was in chaos. The next scheduled guest was pacing back and forth, asking their agent whether they should still go on. Other people were glued to their phones, watching the clips that were already going viral. Production assistants were running around trying to hold everything together, but the energy had completely shifted. Outside the studio, News vans were already starting to arrive. Word had spread fast about what happened, and reporters wanted to get reactions from anyone leaving the building. Social media was exploding with hashtags and hot takes. Some people were defending Clooney, calling him brave for standing up to Bill's cynicism. Others were defending Bill, saying he was just doing his job as a talk show host. But everyone agreed on one thing: this was the most dramatic talk show moment in years. Inside, Bill struggled through the rest of the show. His other guests could sense something was off. His jokes fell flat. His usual quick wit seemed to have abandoned him. He kept glancing at the empty chair where Clooney had been sitting, as if he still couldn't quite believe what had happened. The production team was already dealing with the fallout. Phones were ringing off the hook with journalists wanting comments. Social media managers were trying to figure out what the official response should be. Legal teams were being consulted about whether anything said during the confrontation could be problematic. But mostly, everyone was just in shock. Back in his car, speeding away from the studio, George Clooney sat in silence. His phone was already blowing up with calls and texts, but he ignored them all. He stared out the window at the Los Angeles streets passing by, his jaw still tight with anger. His publicist was frantically calling, probably already working on damage control. His wife had texted asking if he was okay. Friends from the industry were reaching out, some offering support, others worried about the consequences. But Clooney didn't care about any of that right now. He'd spent years being the charming, diplomatic celebrity who never made waves. He'd smiled through countless interviews where hosts took subtle shots at him. He'd laughed off jokes about his lifestyle and his causes. But tonight, something had snapped. Maybe it was the way Bill had mocked the work in Sudan, work that Clooney had poured his heart into for years. Maybe it was the dismissive way Bill had talked about the people risking their lives to help others. Or maybe it was just 15 years of frustration finally boiling over. Whatever it was, George Clooney had had enough, and he'd made sure everyone knew it. The studio audience filed out slowly, still processing what they'd witnessed. Some were excited, already planning to tell everyone they knew about being there for the infamous Clooney walkout. Others looked troubled, uncomfortable with how personal and nasty the fight had gotten. A few were filming themselves outside the studio, giving their reactions for TikTok and Instagram. "I can't believe that just happened," one woman said to her friend as they walked to their car. "I mean, I've seen Bill get into it with guests before, but nothing like that. He crossed a line," her friend replied. "You could see it in George's face. Like, there was a moment where he could have let it go, but Bill just kept pushing." Inside the studio, the crew was breaking down the set for the night. Usually there was joking and casual conversation during cleanup, but tonight everyone was quiet. They'd all seen the confrontation. They'd all heard what was said, and they all knew they'd just been part of something that would be talked about for years. Bill Maher finally left his dressing room after the show ended. He walked to his car without talking to anyone, his face unreadable. His team had told him not to make any statements until they figured out their strategy. But as he sat in the back seat, driving home through the dark streets of Los Angeles, he couldn't stop replaying the confrontation in his mind. Had he gone too far? Was Clooney right about him being cynical? Did he really mock people's humanitarian work just to look smart? These weren't questions Bill Maher usually asked himself. He'd built his career on being provocative, on saying the things other people were afraid to say. But tonight felt different. Tonight he'd pushed someone to their breaking point, and the whole world had watched it happen. The clips were everywhere now. Twitter was trending with multiple hashtags related to the confrontation. YouTube videos were being uploaded with titles like "George Clooney destroys Bill Maher" and "Bill Maher gets what he deserves." Entertainment news sites were rushing to publish articles. Cable news networks were already booking segments to discuss it for the next day. Some of the most shared clips showed the moment when Clooney first stood up, the anger visible on his face. Others focused on Bill's red face and shaking hands as he yelled for security. The most viral clip of all was Clooney's final "fuck you" before walking off. The simple directness of it somehow more powerful than any of his earlier eloquent arguments. Celebrity reactions started pouring in. Some of Clooney's friends in Hollywood were publicly supporting him, praising his passion and conviction. A few comedians were defending Bill, arguing that talk show hosts should be able to challenge their guests. Most people in the industry were staying silent, not wanting to pick sides in such a public fight. Political commentators weighed in too, seeing it as representative of larger cultural divides. Some saw it as a fight between genuine activism and performative wokeness. Others viewed it as cynicism versus optimism. Everyone had an opinion, and everyone wanted to share it. By midnight, the clip had been viewed over 20 million times across all platforms. Morning show producers were already planning segments about it. Late-night hosts were writing jokes. PR teams across Hollywood were using it as a case study in crisis management. The confrontation between George Clooney and Bill Maher had become the biggest entertainment story in months, all because of one heated conversation that spiraled completely out of control. And it had all happened in just 42 seconds of heated back and forth that exploded into the most shocking celebrity meltdown of the year. A conversation that should have been about charity work became a brutal takedown of cynicism itself. George Clooney had walked onto that stage as a guest and walked off as a man who'd finally said what needed to be said, leaving Bill Maher standing alone, his reputation in tatters, facing the biggest backlash of his career.